10 years, 300 doors, plenty of mistakes, and probably a few more wins than I deserve. I've been investing in this business for just over 10 years, and I've made a lot of mistakes, lost a lot of money, but learned a lot of things. And some from my own trials and tribulations, and many from millionaires, people who have way more properties than I do, and other industry experts. And today I want to share my biggest 10 lessons from the last just over 10 years that I've been investing in real estate. So before I do that, if you guys like this stuff, find it valuable, please like, subscribe, share. It really helps us out. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Cameron Tope. I'm with Emerson Property Management. We manage just over 300 doors in the greater Houston area. And like I said, been doing this just over 10 years. Bought my first property in 2014, 2015 time, and I have seen a lot in Houston. We've had hurricanes, we've had obviously COVID, we've had run up of interest rates tripling, almost tripling in Houston. So I've seen 3% interest rates and all the way up to over 7, in some instances, if your credit's not great, 9, 10%. I've seen people invest in land, go over from single family to multifamily, single family to short-term rentals. I've seen a lot. Some of them are really good friends, and some of them are out of the business. When you have seen all this stuff that I have, these booms, busts, all this chaos and madness. I mean, I'm not saying I know everything by any stretch of imagination. I think you all will know that, or the people that know us and do business with us. I don't believe that, but I think I got a good perspective. I didn't even get to mention the tenant drama. There is so many things. I've heard so many stories. It's more drama than a Real Housewives reunion or something like that. But yeah, y'all, and I personally own over 30 doors myself. Emerson manages all my properties. So I personally am a big beneficiary of Emerson's systems and process, and I've been building those for me with my idea in mind as an investor-focused property management company. So let's look at these. I've written these down over here, and that should give you guys an idea. I don't know everything by any stretch, but I can tell you right now, we've seen a lot. Last year, we leased 91 properties and 100 and some turns. So you think about that. If you guys are good at what you do, or good at hiring a property manager, your property manager is good, or you're good at keeping tenants in place, you should never do 90 turns in your entire life. Especially, you know, the average investor owns 1 or 2 properties. You own for 30 years, you should only have 5 to 10 turns if you're lucky, if you're doing a good job. So I did more turns last year than most owners and investors do in their entire career. These are in no particular order, and there's so many. You guys know I like my handy dandy whiteboard. You know, there's some notes on here I want to make sure I capture, so unfortunately you're gonna have to follow along or let me read off this. The biggest thing I think that has been very much a significant change in my investing style is cash flow. Cash flow is a liar. It is a deceitful partner. I invested when I first got into this. I wanted to get out of BP, British Petroleum. I was an engineer there. I saw the market going up and down. I wanted to buy my freedom. Cash flow, it was artificial then, just plain Jane. I just want to be totally transparent. With 3 to 4% interest rates, it's hard not to cash flow. And then Houston made it difficult because we have very high property taxes, and insurance is very high here due to all the natural disasters that can happen. So it might look great on spreadsheets and whatnot, but cash flow is a mythical thing. It really, you have to have a low loan to value to cash flow, or you're just gonna get very little of it. It's your one AC, your one roof, your one foundation repair away from years of cash flow gone. Now, having said that, Cameron, does that mean I should buy negative cash flow? I'm not saying that, but it is very hard to retire off of cash flow. You need to hold it for a long time, pay it off, or get super low loan to value, or wait until you get great interest rates, refinance, or you can at least lower your interest rates and refinance. That's the big key. Now, you guys know there are several different ways. I've talked about it time and time again. There are several different ways to make money off of real estate. It's not just cash flow. Cash flow is actually one of the smallest ways. And I'm not going to go into all of them here, but you have appreciation, you have depreciation, and appreciation's been the one that's been amazing over the past 15 years, 10 to 15 years, right? So that makes way more money than just $100 or $200 a month in cash flow. So appreciation, depreciation, you have your value add, you can buy equity. There's 100 different ways. So not 100, but you know what I'm talking about. There's a half a dozen, a dozen different ways you can do that. So be cognizant of that. That is probably the biggest one. And if you guys shut this off, I totally understand, because I would have too when I first started, but it has been something I've looked at across my portfolio for 10 years. Cash flow is very fleeting. It's not one of those things that you can sit there and rely on. I sure as heck wouldn't want to retire. If I knew I was going to make $2,000 a month in pure cash flow off of one property, I sure as hell wouldn't want to bet my life stake that I only needed $2,000 a month to live, because some months you're going to have more and some months you're going to have less. Number two, Class C, Class D will eat you alive. You will just, I mean, it's like a flock of buzzards or, piranha or something. I mean, it is just, Class C is time and time again a horrible investment. Again, this is just my philosophy here, y'all. So take this for what it's worth with a grain of salt, but this is what I've seen. I bought some Class C properties, and I can tell you right now that my Class B and Class A have way outperformed my Class C properties. They're so much more time intensive. The cash flow is not enough. An AC system, this is the easiest way to think about Class C and cheaper rents. This is the easiest way. If you have to buy a $10,000 total rehaul of a $10,000 HVAC system, let's even use 5. Like, some people are like, oh my God, 10,000 is crazy. Let's use 5,000. That costs $5,000, whether it's in a $50,000 single family home, a cheap Class C, or a $500,000 beautiful place in the burbs, pool, backyard, everything. Now, which one of those do you think has enough rents to cover that expense? In your Class A property or Class B property, it might wipe out 4, 5, 6 months of your cash flow. But in your Class C property, that might wipe out 5 years or the life that you own that. Especially, that's not including any other little things that come up. And Class C, nobody wants to fix them because, oh, well, I'm putting Section 8 in there. I'm putting these lower class people in, so I don't need to worry about, actually paint matching or carpet being clean or anything like that. It's like, yeah, they're harder on the properties, so you have more maintenance, more involvement in them. And so it's hard to make money when you've got $1,000 a month in rent and a roof is still $5,000, an AC system is still $5,000 to $10,000. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So Class C, I do not invest in Class C. Desirability, that is the biggest thing. No matter what happens in the economy, where do people want to be? And we are seeing it right now in Houston. At the time of this recording in 2025, we're seeing tenants being more and more picky. Those, they call it functionally obsolescent, those weird layout properties, those are sitting longer. Because when it was a housing shortage, you had to take it. There was nothing anybody could do about it. But now that you have 15 different options, you'll go take the one that looks nice, that flows well, that you like, that's in a good area. I mean, apples for apples, why wouldn't you do that? I think I've harped on that long enough. Class C, not my cup of tea. Ooh, I just made that up on the spot. And that is one too that looks great on paper, especially, I see this a lot and I hate this. If people use repair and maintenance costs as a percentage of rents, that is stupid. I can tell you right now, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, because that is ridiculous to think that an AC, a foundation, a roof, the main CapEx, main repairs are more on a $500,000 house than a $50,000. That's nonsense. You could have 30, 40, 50, 60% maintenance and repairs on as a percentage of rents on cheaper properties. So sorry, that's a pet peeve of mine. Okay, here's another one. And some people love this, some people hate this, but cheap labor does not equate to, well, and I guess a lot of people know that, but cheap, you get cheap. You get cheap labor, that usually is nonsense and then ends up with more expensive repairs in the end. Guys, it's like, how do I save money on this? Okay, I've got $100. They want to charge me $100. Can I give them down to 85? That, in the grand scheme of things, beating down the higher priced people in some respects is a great thing. I can understand. I don't want to pay way more than I have to, but we have to be anchored in reality. And things have gone up. You want these people, you want your laborers to make money. You want them to be able to provide, and then they'll want to work for you. So you can't beat them down to nothing. And then if you go with a guy or a gal that's super cheap, I mean, you guys have probably seen those videos, right? Where somebody cuts a tree down over a house and it falls into the house. And they said because the guy could do it cheaper, they don't have insurance, they don't know what the hell they're doing. And now you have a tree laying through the front living room, and who's going to pay for that? So that comes up a lot, is can we do this cheaper? Yes, but what is the risk associated with that? If I can save you $25, $30 because this unlicensed, uninsured person is going to go into your property. Is that really, the best thing? And again, I'm not sending somebody who's way overqualified to go out there and screw in a light bulb. But we got to be realistic. People who are good at what they do not work for free. You don't. I would ask you, do you work for nothing? Would you take a 30% pay cut? You are probably paid well for what you do, and you shouldn't be beaten down on your prices to nothing. Again, I'm not saying you want to overcharge, and there's no sense in some of the prices I've seen, especially at some of the other property management companies, because we get invoices, the owners share invoices with us on what it would cost, and they're gouging people. But once you find good people, getting the cheapest or going with the cheapest bid isn't always the wisest thing, and I had to learn that the hard way. The best tenants aren't always the highest income. Guys, this has actually been something that's super interesting. So they're like, well, they have an 800 credit score or they make $30,000 a month. They've got to be good tenants. I want to go with them. That's not necessarily true. We have had people who make a lot of money, especially in Houston with the energy corridor, but then they're gone next year. They're super transient, right? They're in Houston for an assignment for maybe a year or two, and then they're down in Brazil for a year or two, or then they're in the Middle East for a couple years. So these folks are transient and they make good money. They might take care of the property, but turnover will kill your cash flow. So make sure that just because they have a high income or just because they have a high credit score doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a fantastic tenant or a tenant that you want to have for the next 5 or 10 years. Also, some of those people are super needy. We had some guy freak out because we wouldn't let him put a Tesla charger in the garage, like do all the wiring and set it up to charge his Tesla in the garage. So gave us a bad review over that one. I would say one of my big things on that is you want the people who can afford the property, but durability of their career. Do they have kids? You got to think about that as well. Like if you're putting somebody and they're moving to a school district for their kids and they're starting elementary school, odds are they're going to be through, at least through the elementary school, because they're moving there for their kids versus, again, these professionals that move from large oil companies. That's an easy example in Houston, or people that are coming for maybe a medical treatment or something like that are gonna be there for a little while and then leave. Okay, that kind of ties into the second piece. Vacancy kills cash flow. Guys, I don't even know how many videos that is shared so much. I try to emphasize that as much as I can. If you do the math, if you have a property sit vacant for a couple months a year, you will not make money, period. Unless you have the property paid off, and even then it's kind of like your return is so low it doesn't even make sense. So be cognizant about that. There's not much more I can say on that. I beat that one to death, but that is a big one. Vacancy will kill your cash flow. And again, vacancy can mean super transient people that make a lot of money, that look good on paper, fantastic, no problem, but can also mean the Class C properties I was talking about earlier, where people, are constantly getting evicted or constantly job hopping, so then they can't pay rent and they leave. That's, turnover costs are high. There's a handful of things too I talk about up here regarding what you have to do within the Texas property code. And a lot of those are routine things you have to do no matter what happens or every turnover. So no matter if that turnover happens 3 months later or 3 years later, you have to rekey. You have to check the smoke alarms. You have to, there's just a handful of things that have to be done. Your property manager is either an asset or a liability. And here's the thing, thank God in Texas we're actually have to be licensed to do third-party management, but I have seen people who have absolutely no idea what the hell they're doing in property management. And frankly, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing in the beginning either. But the good thing for me, I had my properties I was working through. I made the mistakes on my properties. And I'm not saying we go without making mistakes. We definitely make mistakes, really a lot. I shouldn't say a lot, but we make mistakes. We're trying to continue to grow and push the boundaries. And when you do that, you make mistakes. But I can tell you right now, if you look at any of our reviews, you look at our customer and client experience, we will make it right. If we make a mistake, we will make it right. And we have built these processes to prevent all these mistakes. But we've seen owners, especially now, there's like a big M&A, merger and acquisition with a lot of property management companies. So these big companies are buying up all these smaller ones. And, they might be out of California, out of, I pick on California a lot, but out of anywhere. And they don't know the greater Houston market. They might not know your local market. They're just sitting somewhere 1,000 miles away and have the bean counters, i.e. accountants, who are sitting there trying to figure out how they can scrape a couple pennies off of your rental income every month. And that's what they're designed to do. They have a whole fee structure because when they have 10, 20, 30,000 units, if they can make an extra couple dollars here a month across the portfolio, they're making a lot of money. Again, yeah, you want to have a property manager, or we call asset managers, understand the fundamentals of your rental property and owning a property as an investor. Because if they don't understand that and they're just like, oh yeah, I just got in this business because I heard it was good, or I'm a real estate agent and I couldn't make it in that, so I'm going to do property management, run. The last thing I'll say on that is property management is a long feedback loop. Meaning, if I walk out of here and I stub my toe, I immediately know I have smashed my toe, right? I've screwed up, I hit the coffee table, whatever. In property management, I place a bad tenant. I might not get that feedback that I have screwed up for 6 months. I might not get that feedback for 9 months, for a year. Next thing you know, it's a meth lab. I literally had a property that they had turned it into a marijuana house. They had pulled all the ductwork out of the ceilings. They had trashed everything. It was a disaster. I did not know. I thought the tenant was good. He was paying on time, all that. Long feedback loop. I found out many months later that it was a disaster. I had made a big mistake. That's another reason you want your property manager, asset manager, a solid one that understands the business. This is a big one too, and I learned this actually while I was at BP. They were really good about this, but you're not in real estate, you're in risk management. And that means how all our job is as property managers, as asset managers, not all, but the main thing is reducing risk. I want to reduce the risk that a tenant files a lawsuit against you. I want to reduce the risk that the tenant doesn't pay rent. I want to reduce the risk of your property having all these cataclysmic issues. I want to reduce the risk. That is my job. That is all we look at. How do we make these as reliable and risk-free as possible for you? How do we make sure that the repairs we do happen for the life of the property, or as long as we can? How do we make sure that we have great tenant relations? So again, they're not as likely to go out and file a judgment or not pay rent. How do we make sure that we put a good tenant in your property? Risk reduction. And that goes back to my vendor comment. You go to the cheapest vendor that you can. They don't really give a shit about the sewer line or whatever. They just, they're paying me $1,000 to do this. I'm just going to go do this. And then you put a tenant in there, and now the sewer line's not right. Now you have a problem. Now you got to pay somebody else to do it because that guy's not coming back. You already paid him, he's gone. And that happened to me as well. I paid a guy to do a sewer line because it was $1,000 or $2,000 cheaper, and I got screwed. So lawsuit, but I got him at the end of the day. So neither here nor there. Risk reduction. Think about that. Our job is to keep you out of court and keep that property full and issues to a minimum. So risk management is our big thing. Okay, insurance in Houston is a different animal. I am originally from Ohio. We have very little natural disasters up there. So insurance is stupid low, whereas here in Houston, depending upon where you're at, it can be extremely high, especially on the coastal cities. So that was something that was, a very big shock to me, is insurance will eat your lunch. I've heard very bad things about Florida and some of the markets there where it's just getting so unaffordable to insure. So you just have to understand what you're going to do on your insurance strategy. I personally raise my deductibles. So there are properties that have 20, 30, 40. I think I might have one with $50,000 deductible on it. I only want insurance if the house completely burns to the ground or it's get washed entirely away in a flood. That's what I want insurance for. I do not want insurance for the tenant left the water on, I have to replace the floors. That's not what I want insurance for. So raising deductibles is a good way to get your premiums lower. But understand, you have wind, you can have hail, we have hurricanes, flood zones, and that has been a whole new thing in Houston over the past 10 years. So be cognizant of that, understand your insurance, and make sure you get some quotes. I've seen people denied for trees hanging over, just limbs hanging over roofs. So especially if you're gonna buy new, understand what your insurance risk is. This has always been a big thing too. Do not chase appreciation. Do not bank on that. I always estimate 2% appreciation when I'm doing my calculations. Some people say that's too conservative. Houston traditionally has been somewhere between 4 and 5. 3 and 5 is probably a good number, but I like to be super conservative and use 2. And then that way I'm never disappointed. There are folks like Austin, our little neighbors over there, that thought that the gravy train was gonna last for God knows how long. They thought they were gonna continue to get 10% or double-digit appreciation over years. That will never happen long-term. It cannot happen long-term. So be cognizant of that. If you're gonna buy for appreciation, make sure, which I'm not saying that appreciation isn't a great piece of a return for your overall investment property, but it is just one component. So do not go, just like you don't want to go all in for cash flow, you do not want to go all in on appreciation. I've seen people do that. Hey, this isn't a path of progress. This $200,000 house will be worth 500 grand later on. Well, I've seen people wait a long time, and that $200,000 house is still 200,000 or maybe 180. or maybe 220. And by the time you factor in costs, you've lost money. So be cognizant of that. That path of progress, the appreciation game can get shaky. I do not like to play it, never have, never will. This is the last one here, y'all. Treat this like a business. I have seen too many investors, and I have been guilty of it before in the past, playing it like it's a hobby. I'll put a tenant in, I'll respond to this, or I'm not going to respond to them. Let them figure it out. I'm not going to take care of my tenant. And then it's a cataclysmic issue in the house or a lawsuit or something of that nature. So treat it like a business. Watch your income, watch your rents, watch your maintenance and repairs, watch what's going on in the market to understand, are you performing above or below? Because if you don't know, you're just going off a gut feel. Sometimes you guess right, sometimes you guess wrong, but you're really just guessing. So treat it like a business, especially if you want to grow your portfolio. It becomes more and more important as you have more and more properties. So that's the last one. Treat it like a business. Don't treat it like a side hustle. And because what will happen, again, that long feedback loop, you won't even know what you screwed up until it's too late. So I have made a lot of mistakes, y'all, countless. I can't even count. But those 10 lessons, I think, will help you save a boatload of money. And again, it's not going to be applicable to everybody. And I understand everybody invests for different reasons, but those have been the things I wish people had told me, especially number one, with not all cash flows, created equal. It's not all about cash flow. That right there has been one that I had a tough pill for me to swallow. But all those lessons we have created, our systems and our process, they allow us at Emerson to build everything, to reduce your risk, to talk to you about certain items that come up, to make sure we have a good vendor network. And that's why our owners trust us with almost $100 million in real estate, if you add up all their property values. So if you guys find this helpful, if you like it, if you enjoy it, you guys can subscribe to our newsletter. It's a monthly thing I send out just on information, or just drop a comment. Let me know if you guys have any other lessons or there was something that I missed. And I'm always happy to chat too if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns about the Houston market. Okay, y'all. See you next week. Thank you.